Seems like everyone's here. No new ingress. I'm going to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is a roll call. Femi?
Barbara Anderson. Here. Carol Augsburger. Here. Stuart Burlacher.
Here.
Jeff Dawson.
Here.
Darren Eastburn. Tom Fairman. Here. Derek Liebert. Here. Michael Stevenson.
Here.
Michael Brunk.
Here.
We have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from December 4th, 2013, a regular meeting. You've had copies of that sent to you. Move that they be accepted. A second?
I second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Approval of minutes from the January 16th special meeting. Again, you've all received copies of those. Are there any amendments or a move to accept?
I move.
Second?
Second.
All right. Signify your approval by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Okay, we have two items on the agenda tonight, and they involve the memorialization of the 312 South Kohler hackberry tree. And before we get into that, in terms of making decisions on the various proposals, some of which are unique, some of have to be adopted in entirety, and some of which are mutually acceptable, I'd like to have Lisa Hatchdurian of the Urbana Arts Council come up and talk about a means we've been discussing for deciding and prioritizing the various suggestions for memorialization. Then we'll go over them, and then we'll have an opportunity for public input. Thank you, Lisa, for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
There's a little gray switch to turn it on.
It's the green light's on. Does that mean
Okay.
it's on? Okay. So I've been asked to come and speak about kind of a more formalized procedure for a call for artists for the Hackberry Tree Memorial. Right now, from what I understand, it's been a very informal process, and you have a selection of proposals that are both aesthetic and also a little bit more practical for the tree. This is what we do with the public art process, which I think can be tailored to this process very easily and won't take a lot of time to do. I would think maybe 3 to 4 weeks for the whole entire process, but what you would do first is send out a call for artists, and we have all of the processes for that in place, and it can be done through all of the media, newspaper, radio, internet, social media, websites, things like that. And within this call for artists, you have a selection criteria, and we have documents here that we use. This is our grant program application and our guidelines, so I can kind of craft these as one particular document. And you decide whether you want to, or how you want to limit the selection process, whether you want it to be just Champaign-Urbana artists and community members, or you want it to go all out to Illinois. All of this can be in your guidelines. Then you want to kind of figure out what your goals are for the project, who's eligible, the budget, what the range of the money is that's going to be awarded, and then what is going to be submitted, whether it's just a one-page proposal. You can craft that to how many words, 500 or 1,000. Basically, all of this, as I keep on going over it, it can be crafted, and it's very flexible. You should put in there any restrictions that you might have for the project, like the money can be used for this but can't be used for that. And then probably most importantly, the evaluation criteria for the jury panel, and that at least for the public art process, can be it's aesthetic, artistic, community integration and also what the feasibility is for the project, and then timeline. So that all goes into the document and the application. Then the second step is forming a jury panel, and that can be, could be comprised of anywhere from 5 to 7 members or more or less. Again, it's variable, and I would recommend members from the Tree Commission being on there. We can ask a member or two from the Public Art Commission to be on there. Obviously, we should have some members from the community in there as well, and any staff who would be administering the process. And then you meet to choose, and then notify your chosen artists or community members. And in this, you can decide, too, whether you want to have the process just be aesthetic or be more practical or do both. And that'll be part of your document, your call for artists. And that's it. Then the project can start rolling from there.
Thank you, Lisa. Are there any questions for Lisa about this process from the commission or anyone else? Okay. This seems to me like a good procedure for going forward. We're talking about 3 weeks, not a huge amount of time before some sort of priority list is generated, and there'd be input from the public, from the Tree Commission, from a jury panel, and from ordinary neighborhood citizens that can come forward from you here. And I think I've asked Steve Wall to maybe coordinate getting citizens from the neighborhood in Urbana who don't have a horse in the race to come together and help provide input on this procedure. Seems fair to me, and it brings in expertise outside of our immediate group. The Tree Commission advises on management of city trees, and when you get to the aesthetics and appropriateness of memorials, I think we need a little help. And so I believe we'll go forward and follow your procedure, seeing that it takes a few weeks and is probably appropriate to make sure all the proposals get their due consideration. So again, if there are no questions, Lisa, thank you
And
very much.
I'd like to say, too, I'd be happy to serve in whatever capacity you
Yes.
need me to. So.
Yeah, if you would take the lead on this, we'd greatly appreciate it. All right, thank you. Okay.
What's the function of this meeting?
The function of this meeting is to bring forward any new proposals that people may have for memorializing the tree.
How will these relate to what she just said?
Oh.
That have already been proposed?
They'll be part of the process that they'll consider. And we're going to go over them tonight for public input, the ones that have come in, and entertain new proposals. So this is an opportunity for people who haven't presented yet to do it. So we're going to go over the list. If the proposer is here, please come up. We've got a list of proposals. I don't know if you all have copies of them, but if, Mike?
I can just start to go through them, and
Yeah.
as we come across one with a artisan that's here, we'll let them present their proposal.
Okay, that's a good idea. And we'll do that. Also, after the presentation, we'll have an open discussion of these. So again, we didn't have a lot of time to discuss the proposals after the last public meeting. And so the purpose of this meeting then is to provide for further input discussion of these in preparation for serious consideration. So after we go through the list, and we'll have presentations of any new proposals. The more details that proposals contain, the better for their consideration. And so we're open for any more detail. Some of the proposals that went into the minutes last week were kind of sketchy. And so the more details that members of the public have as they make proposals, the better. And then I see here from so we'll have a general discussion of that. And then once that's concluded, I see there's some new business with regards to a mini park or a rest area in the parking lot across from this building that we'll bring forward and discuss. So Mike, if you'd like to get started with the list, and then we'll reserve comments until after all the presentations and proposals are dealt with. So please proceed.
Okay, the first proposal was an idea of creating a public tree memorial, or a cookie memorial, a slice of the tree trunk that would be displayed in a public location, whether it be the library. We're more recently thinking the city foyer here, or some place like that, probably indoor, but may possibly be displayed outside. The process involves, of course, if this was to be a consideration, it would be preferred that the tree slice was from the base of the tree, because that would be the oldest portion of the tree. Because the idea is to preserve the tree cookie and to notate historic points on the display. In order for this to take place, there's some quite a bit of effort that has to go through a process that this has to go through. One is that we, the city, would need to purchase some chemical. It's a non-toxic chemical. It's very harmless, but it's not cheap. It's polyethylene glycol that this wood would need to be soaked in for several months and then worked. So I'm not sure how that works with the sanding that we were looking to do on it, and it may be that it's too labor intensive. But if we followed through with the process, it would take some volunteer time. I volunteered to help sand the cookie and do that on my own time. There would be some staff time that would be involved in moving the piece. We're looking at either soaking the piece in a horse trough at a building next to Public Works, or possibly in one of the Park District's operations buildings. So there's two possible locations. So there would be some staff time in getting that slice cut and then taken over to that location. So this is probably one of the more expensive proposals, and it includes, it was an idea that we were looking to incorporate from Stuart's original idea, which was to take a slice of our older trees and study them for historic purposes and tree ring counting. But I think this sanding for this piece is quite a bit more than what you were.
More, yeah. I just did like sanding a little 2-inch wide lane from the center to the edge, not the whole surface of the tree right now. It's a huge operation, not huge, but it's a lot of work. I don't have the equipment for that.
Yeah, so it'd probably take a floor sander, and it may take a little effort. So that's the scoop on proposal one.
Can I interrupt? Oh, excuse me. Can we get an appraisal of what the status of the trunk is? It doesn't seem like this makes any sense in terms of how many of these we could do until we know what happened. What's it look like? What do we have to work with?
Well, that's a very good question. Of course, this would not be a viable proposal if the tree was
Yeah.
hollow.
Right,
So that's something that we won't know until we take the log down. Now, the hollows were in the branches above the trunk, but underneath those branches where we took the top part of the tree off, it was solid. Some minor decay, but certainly not a significant amount. Now, there's a sunken area on the north side of the trunk that's a vertical sunken area that may be signs of inner decay. We won't know until we get in and actually slice the tree to either mill the wood or what have you. So we wouldn't pursue this particular proposal until we knew those answers. And it would be, the timeline on this would be probably 6 months or more, just to have the cookie dry, soaked in the chemical and then dried, and then worked. So it'd be, probably a 6-month to a year project. But it would only be a project if the trunk was a solid piece.
Carol, it's pretty solid at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, some of these proposals might meld with other ones. And so if there's some sort of designated priority for use of the majority of that standing stump, then even the top cookie is pretty impressive and pretty solid. There are little elements of decay, so it's a viable idea.
Well, there's a number of alternatives to determine that the decay in the trunk, but it wouldn't really be necessary. We'd have to cut into the wood for a number of these projects, so then we'll know once we do that. It's the sounding that we've done with the trunk is that there's, it doesn't seem to be hollow at the base of the tree.
And the very top portion already provides an opportunity to do this. It's
Right.
pretty solid.
That's
so,
true, right, where we have it open.
Yeah. Okay, proposal number 2.
Okay, proposal number 2 is, there were individuals that came to me that wanted to buy slices of the tree trunk. So this simply is that several slices of the tree trunk be made and sold for funding for some of these proposals or the Legacy Tree Program. Right now I have 2 commitments at a price of $250 per slice that people are willing to pay for a piece of this historic tree. And I think their intention is to make a table or something artistic out of it like that. But they would not be preserved pieces, they'd just be raw pieces of the trunk. So the proposal is to take a section of the tree and to create some cookies. Now we may have that section already with the top portion that we took out. We have about 3 feet or thereabouts of solid trunk section just below the crotch structure of the tree that we could probably get half a dozen cookies out of if we were had a good sharp chain. So there's a possibility that that section could be used for that. Proposal 3. Dennis, would you like to speak about leaving the trunk standing? Is that a proposal that you would like to present?
Yeah, we have a sheet from Inona that I'll read, and then Dennis can expound
Okay,
on it.
all right.
Ilona Metzkowski proposed leaving the trunk standing, and she said she can't attend tonight's meeting, but she would like to ask that the trunk of the giant hackberry tree be preserved as a columnar memorial. And that's the extent of the detail. So if there are further details on that, I'm unaware of them, because this could include some artistic work or engraving or other ornamentation or planters and that at the base. So maybe Dennis can expound on that if there are more details.
Yeah, well, first I'd like to say that I really appreciated the conversation that we had the last time the Tree Commission met. I thought it was one of the best public forums that I've seen take place in a commission setting. So it was really well handled, evenly. The topic was really evenly handled, and I thought it was like a very educational experience for everybody. So just to start out, let me say that. Some of the people in the neighborhood who really regretted seeing the tree come down, of course, really wanted to preserve it and were hoping that the Tree Commission would consider removing 2 branches of the 3 that originally were under question at the main junction of the crotch. Now that we've seen the sections, and I've gone over and inspected them at both the Perkins site and the main section, which is the most telling perhaps at the Landscape Recycling Center, it's very interesting to see what there is to see after the tree's been cut. And I don't know if any of you have been able to go out to those 2 locations and observe it, but I really would recommend it, because part of the educational process of evaluating tree removal would be to look at these sections. And I really would love to actually talk about what I observed versus sort of what we were led to believe would be true. I think there was a certain disengaged kind of fact data about what kind of happened and what we thought would happen. So, but I was going to bring some slides, but actually I thought somebody else was going to do that today and I didn't want to go into that conversation. But I would say that it would be really wise for many of you to go out and just examine the material. But as you know, looking at the tree on Kohler Street, the top looks very sound. It's solid looking. Certainly, the last cut at at that division line was solid at the base. We don't know if there's really serious rot within the tree, and the rot that was in the branches that we were concerned about didn't really meet the disaster level of deterioration, which we were kind of expecting. Indeed, the larger hollow sections that begin to look like a donut in the long branches that were the main branches of the tree still retained 2/3 of the wood surface, and there was 1/3 of circular rot in the center, the heartwood. So according to the discussion that we had here in the slides that we were looking at when we were evaluating how dangerous the tree was, the amount of rot that was considered to be the most dangerous or the significant danger would have only left 1/3 of the circular rim of wood still viable. Well, if you look at these cross sections, we find that 2/3 of the wood is actually viable in the tree we cut down. So it's hard to know if we could have indeed let this tree survive for another 25 years before we reached only 1/3 of viable wood holding up these branches. That said, I think there's an argument that can be made to leave the trunk in place as a living, well, it's not living anymore because it's a dead tree now, but as a memorial to the location and the place that this tree stood. And I want to just refer to the fact that the elm tree, the historic elm tree that's in East Urbana on the north side of the street, that had existed there in the Nancy Weber Munhall property, and at a location where we have now a commemorative plaque and a new tree planted in commemoration of that ancient tree, a tree that was spoken where Abraham Lincoln spoke in 1856, that had been appearing in newspaper articles in 1902 at a point where the tree itself had lost its top in a thunderstorm, lightning strike, and it was only a 25-foot column. People were still going in 1902 to that tree and taking their photographs in front of it because of its significance in the community. And the son of, and I'm going to get his name wrong because I didn't look it up tonight, the Cohen family who lived on Elm Street, who were well-known musicians and artists in the community in the early 1900s. Samuel Cohen, I think his name was, his son, and I think his name was William, wrote a poem about this ancient tree, which he said no longer existed, but that he still wrote a poem about the significance of that tree. So I think there's a kind of an interesting thing. We have the potential of making the tree memorial not some pieces that have been carved and chopped, but actually to leave the tree in situ where it stands. And I think that the tree would probably survive for quite a few number of years, probably 25 years in sight. And it's the most interesting thing about that tree is that it has it's on a raised embankment, and it has a very defined and visible large root spread below it, which I think is part of the quality that made that tree such an interesting tree in the first place. So Ilona Makovsky really does feel that the memorial column is the best solution, and I guess I'd probably want to agree with her on that. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Couple comments. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll turn this on. Couple comments, if I may. Dennis points up that we already have a memorial in place for the large elm that Lincoln spoke under. So there is a precedence for memorializing trees, and that memorial is a planting of, I think, a hybrid elm that's not subject to Dutch elm disease. In the case following up on comments at the last meeting, I've and with Mike's help and some volunteers, we got cuttings from the living branch of the tree as it was cut down, and there are 2,700 hardwood cuttings treated with growth hormones, rooting hormones, that are under mist right now. And we're going to also do some bud grafting. And this would be a potential memorial replanting that would be genetically identical to the tree itself. Hardwood cuttings from hackberry trees aren't known to propagate at all, and that suggests it's probably going to be difficult. But if we could even get half a dozen out of those 2,700, that would be a nice memorial replacement planting, memorial planting. And then with respect to the tree cutting itself, yeah, the branch wood, 2 of them had hollows in them, and the wood adjacent to the branch juncture was more intact than it was thought to be. But again, the very critical point here is that at the branch juncture, whether you have solid wood or hollows or not, if you have checking and you have cracks from stress, it doesn't, if you have solid wooden branches, that actually makes it more subject to failure. So the amount of wood in the branch is less critical than the decay and cracking and checking at the branch juncture, which was, and I inspected it myself, and it was pretty dicey. So with that, thank you. Proposal number 4. Mike?
Oh, one thing I'd like to mention on the cuttings before I forget is that the master gardeners volunteered to help make those cuttings. So I think we got close to, was it 200, 300 over to you? Did you get a count on?
There were 300 actual branches, and we took 4, 5, 6-inch cuttings from those branches and came up with 2,700 pieces of branch with buds on them to try and propagate.
Okay, so I certainly want to put a big thank you out to the Champaign County Master Gardeners for coming over and helping out on that.
Yeah.
Proposal 4 is Daniel. Daniel's here, and I'll let Daniel present his proposal for use of the hackberry wood.
Daniel, just make sure the green light's on so we can all
Green
hear.
lights on. My name is Daniel Schneider. I am a furniture maker as well as a ecologist and professor at the university. And I have some pictures of my work. I'm proposing to utilize the wood from the tree to build a conference table that might be used by the city in City Hall or for other uses. Hackberry is not a really commonly used wood, so I brought some hackberry boards that I happen to have that are also reclaimed urban lumber. It's very similar to ash. As you can see, it can have a very pretty kind of creamy yellow color. It can also have some spalting that is fungal marking, as you can see in this piece, and also it can commonly have this kind of mineral staining, so you get the gray and cream together. So it can be an attractive wood. So anyway, I thought I'd bring that here. The furniture I like to make also utilizes reclaimed lumber. This is a image of a table that I just finished that's made with walnut, that's reclaimed urban lumber. The style of furniture I like to make has live edges and really kind of exhibits the tree-iness of the lumber. So I just wanted to show some of my work. What I'm proposing is, depending on the lumber would have to be sawn and dried, and depending on the quality and size of the boards, that would determine to some extent the kind of furniture you could make from it. But this piece here is about 7 feet by 3 feet. Here's the top. This is a different table I've made in the same style with the other reclaimed urban walnut. This is a cherry table that I've made. So I just wanted to give you an idea of my work with these pictures. This is a maple table to show how I use figure in the work I do. So anyway, I would propose to build a table from this lumber. If the lumber were provided, then I'm proposing that I would charge about $1,000 for building a table, which is substantially less than what I've been selling these pieces at. Another option to help memorialize the tree would be to put some lettering in it that would identify it. Can you see the lettering here? This would have to be done. I don't do carving myself, so this would have to be done with a CNC mill. There are places here that would do it, and I would just charge whatever it costs to have that lettering put in, and the particular whatever it said would be up to the tree commission or the city of Urbana in the proper way to memorialize the tree. But that would be this is a potential design. The final design would depend on, again, the wood, what it looks like, how large the boards would be, and what the use might be for the city. So it would be in consultation with the city, the final design. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Is
Sure.
hackberry dimensionally stable? I mean, is it? I've never seen it used much for wood.
It shrinks a lot from live to when you've actually dried it. Once it's dried, it's similar, I think, to other species, so it will move. But the style of this table allows it to. It moves mostly across the grain, and the style takes that movement into account. So it could move.
Daniel, is there a mill that can handle that 5-foot diameter bowl?
This wood is from a couple in Argenta, which the next proposal also mentions. It's called Autumn Mill. And I think he can. I've seen some very, very large logs in his yard. And he's worked with hackberry. And he primarily specializes in sawing reclaimed urban trees. And I've used his lumber before.
All right, thank you. Any more questions for Daniel? All right, next proposal is number 5. Yeah. Feel free to come up and look at the hackberry.
Proposal 5 answers your question, Jeff. There is a Sawyer in Argenta that can handle a 5-foot diameter log up to 20,000 pounds. We estimated that a section of wood that was about, if I remember right, 7 or 8 feet long was about 8,000 pounds. So we theoretically could take him a 16-foot section of that trunk and still be in good shape weight-wise, and the diameter wouldn't be a problem for him. And the Sawyer, this proposal is to utilize the trunk wood or a portion thereof to generate usable wood for wood projects within the community. The wood could be sold to the community. The wood could be provided to the community. The Sawyer is willing to mill and dry the wood, kiln dry the wood for no charge in return for 50% of the final product, the lumber. Or if we were interested in paying for or wanting the 100% of the wood, it would be about 90 cents a board foot for milling and drying. So on the web, I'm not too familiar with selling wood. Hackberry wood is unusual. It's not typically found in lumber yards, as well as a lot of urban wood. So I think people like Daniel and other artisans that are here could utilize this wood because it's fairly rare and memorialize the tree in that manner with different projects that they make out of it. So we submitted this as a proposal that would help certainly provide wood to Daniel's project, but then also a lot more board feet of wood would also be available to the public.
Yeah, it'd probably have to be marketed through a specialty wood seller.
Well, CU
directly.
Wood Shop here in Champaign-Urbana has taken some of our wood. We've started this urban wood utilization process with our ash program, our ash reduction program, a number of years back. And what we did was we provided, we wanted the wood to be utilized rather than just mulched or cut into firewood. So we found a sawyer for that particular project in Monticello that, again, cut the wood at no cost for the lumber and made kitchen cabinet lumber out of it for kitchen cabinets. And CU Wood Shop also took a portion of that, and they titled it Urbana Ash, and they sold it to their patrons. So we just did that on the idea that we wanted the wood to be utilized. We weren't trying to make any revenue off of that particular project. So to answer your question, CU Wood Shop would be an outlet locally at least.
Just a point of information. I've seen hackberry paneling. It's not very commonly sold, and it's nice. So boards could be made into paneling in some city office and memorialized that way. Another thing, this is kind of a quirky take on one of the aspects of carbon cycling. Wood that decomposes in the forest or as mulch returns to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Wood used in housing or to make furniture is not recycled as carbon dioxide. It comes out of the basically atmospheric pool, and I don't know how important that is on a worldwide basis, but just a side comment of interest. All right, the next proposal, wood carving owl.
Urban wood utilization is also becoming a trend with the municipalities, and I think it has a lot to do with the emerald ash borer. So I played the words there a little bit. That's urban and Urbana in one word, wood utilization. So I just wanted to point that out. It wasn't a typo. Proposal 6 is a wood carving of an owl by a gentleman by the name of Gary Cutler. He's an Urbana resident. I'll pass this down the row here for people to look at. Gary couldn't be here tonight, but he did provide me the piece that would give us a good idea of what he's looking to do with his hackberry wood. And he needs a piece of a certain size from probably a limb. He prefers that the bark still be remaining on it, and it has to be a certain length and depth. And we have stored a number of the larger branches of variable sizes, actually, out at our old wood site for people to use because we weren't sure, what we were going to do with it. So we've put a number of pieces aside for various projects that we intend to open up for artisans. So there's plenty of branches out there that Gary could choose from to do this piece. He suggested what he would like to do with this is he would like to carve a piece with these owl fledglings and donate it to the Anita Purvis Center. Or, we could possibly display it at a city location or the public library, but a public place. So this is a project that's been proposed at no cost as long as we provide him the wood to create the piece.
That's made of elm, which is a cousin.
Walnut.
Or is that walnut?
Walnut.
Okay. So it's an even lighter wood than the hackberry. Okay, next proposal, number 7.
The rough sawn bench, Michael is here, I believe. If he'd like to come up and present his idea. He made a model. He was one of the first that approached me with an idea of what to do, and I brought his model here. I'll let him explain the process.
Good evening. I'm Michael Pittman, two-time grand champion here, chainsaw carver. It's pretty simple. If you look at that, you'll see it was put together in about a half hour, just to give Mike the idea of what I had in mind. Obviously, the lower the slice, the more detailed the rings, and yet to be determined is the condition of the base. So it's kind of based off of the condition of the wood when you get there, or if you get there. I do know that I did do a carving for the Champaign County Fair, and it's a corn cob just outside of the pavilion there. And what I came across was, if you're going to leave a carving out, that you need to take off and remove the water source. So the cuts had to come in, so the water line stopped coming up the trunk, and we're going to make it removable so he can move it around at the county fair. And this is such a big tree that you have, to leave it standing, it would probably outlast all of us, you know, and untouched. But if you want to, if it starts to rot, there's an awful lot of weight. A lot of tons up there is pretty dangerous. Plaque memorial would be great. There's enough wood to do just about every project you're being offered. You know, it's an awful lot of wood. You could do benches all the way up it. I like the table idea. I mean, it's some beautiful ideas. The timeline on this could be put in the library. I'd love to see it used as a learning tool for kids. Historical monuments that have happened in Urbana. Flatiron Building. How old is this tree? What's how far back can we go? Does anybody know? You know, do we know how old it is? That's the history of Urbana. You know, that's the best part about this tree. It's been around more than any of us. So, in return, you could give, you know, the Lincoln speech, what date, what ring it correlates with. If it's in the library, kids can find their date they were born. You know, we can find the date we were born. You know, I mean, it goes back real far. I just hope you accept one of these, be it standing, be it cut. Just do something with it before, you know, it gets chipped up.
Any questions for Mike? I had a couple. I recall your proposal was to take half of the cross-section of the trunk and sort of sand that as a bench back so that you could see the dates, the rings.
The process of this is, if you have the trunk,
Right.
if you go right down the center of the trunk,
Right.
you could slab it out too thick, 2 inches, 3 inches, whatever, you know. 3 inches is big, really too big. 2 inch back for a bench is fine. You can stand it up, and that's the back of the bench. However you want to make the feet, or the part you sit on, can be used. This side would be finished. This can be left rough cut. You can sand it down. You can count the lines. You can see the lines. You can see all of it. What I treat my carvings with, and they've been in the weather for years, 20 years, and they show it's wood shrinks and stretches. It all does. You know, so minor, what do you call them, blemishes show up over time. I use Penacroil. It's thinner than the Glyco, is it? And it's more expensive, but you know, you can pre-soak, you can soak a piece of wood with it while it's green. It stabilizes the wood You can carve it, chip it. It keeps it from chipping, cracking, splitting, and peeling. What it does, goes in the wood, pulls the water out, replaces the water, crystallizes and stabilizes the wood. Then you can carve it. You can still paint it, but you just can't use it for utensils. Okay, that's a whole nother area. But and then I put floor finish on it. Oil base or the other, and very durable, UV rated, lasts. I walk by my carvings in front of my house, power sprayer, spray it off, looks like I just did it. Been there 20 years. You know, so they're substantial. They stay around. I've got several around town. Addresses, Mike Poor, you're well aware of. The address at his house is a peace of mind. You can go see it, look at it. You know, when you're outside, you're still a piece of wood, so bugs can find their way. You know, that's the thing about having it outside. And it, on a big trunk like that, all you need is something to start it. You know, unless it's treated wood, it can get impregnated by anything, termites, whatever. Then it can just be a disaster from there.
Okay.
And the cost of my project is that, what you saw, and most all of that is the chemicals and the finish. $60 is for me. I usually do $1,400 for a carving, so it's just, I enjoy the tree myself. I'm like, I don't want it cut, you know, but if it has to be, it has to be.
So, Mike, you're saying if it were made and treated and it was indoor, it'd last decades.
True.
But also, if it were, say, the legs were on a concrete base, outdoors, even at the Hackberry site or at some other memorial site, and it was treated and treatments were kept up, it would last decades outside.
At least 20 years.
At least 20 years.
As
exactly.
examples, yes.
So it could be indoor, outdoor, the location. Best memorialized could be on the site or near or Carl Park or anywhere. With a base of concrete or something that keeps the moisture from rising in the legs.
See, the same thing went with the Champaign County Fair. I told Mike, I said, we're dealing with something that's around 800 pounds.
Yeah.
County Fair was the following week.
Yeah.
I said, what's going to happen? You took away all the toys, and there's this, and all these kids, they're climbing on it. They're going to climb on it. So we altered the carving so that it wasn't very accessible to climb up onto.
Okay.
I wanted the shucks to come out and go like this and expose the corn. Well, we cut that idea out because that was a handle to climb on. I said, you don't want something 800 pounds falling on anybody. And that's why anchoring it would have to be a cost of something. You know, how you got your benches anchored in the park, like Blair Park, things like that. You know, it's concreted.
All right.
And it's a safety thing.
Well, we'd like to thank you for your generous proposal. And if there are no more questions, we'll move on. Yes, Mike.
A couple quick ones. You mentioned you smooth sand the back to do the timeline. Would you smooth sand the seat part of it too for
It would
seating?
be very comfortable.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And then the
The bench part, the seat part doesn't really need to be of that tree. If you would rather not, if you want to make it walnut, that would be fine, or black cherry. They're all the wood I use is Urbana, recycled.
okay. The second question, and I wanted to ask Daniel the same one. Would you be willing to make more than one at the same price?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
All right, Daniel, would you also be willing to make more than one? Okay, so we have multiple opportunities then on both of those, the conference table and this bench. Thank you, Michael.
You bet. Thank you for your time.
Okay, proposal number 8, finished stump and plaque.
The finished stump was a discussed proposal of the group and staff of how we could memorialize the ideas. One of the initial ideas of leaving the stump rather than grinding it out like we typically do on our removals, and leaving it of a height of maybe a couple feet that would be something that the public could interact with, possibly trying to create a very clean cut where they could interact with it and count the rings and see how old the tree was. And the idea was to do something like that, put a plaque next to the tree stating the history of the tree, or what the tree was, and maybe a short little history of it. So the price on this would be basically the plaque. We've been looking at those for our legacy tree program, and that was also the price on leaving the column trunk. That $400 was the price I used for this one and that one to estimate the cost of a bronze plaque for putting next to this stump. So Proposal 8's basically just a finished stump where we would angle it, or possibly put a plaque next to it. There maybe could be some landscaping that went along with that, some minor landscaping just to spruce up the area. But that was that idea on Proposal 8.
Proposal 10, wood pins and purse hangers.
Yes, we have the artisan here, Wally. Would you like to present your idea? Now, before I knew Wally could make it, I just threw a cost of about $300 per 10 pins based on some of the kit prices. So correct me if I'm wrong, Wally, on what that cost would be.
Yes, I've been a pin turner now for a little over a year and a half, and my wife's helped me get started on this, and we both took a course over here at CU Woodworking, and turned our own pins. In fact, I got this the one she made. This is called Slimline, and I've made several others, and here, I'll let you hand that out to him. What? Oh, and this is another one I made out of acrylic. And let me see this right here a minute. And we just got married on 4th of July this last year. And they said, well, I need something kind of a pen stand for our wedding, for our guest book. So I made this right here. All out of cedar. So I don't know if anybody can see it. Everybody can see that or not. Whoops. Now there, get back in there. But I don't have any CNC material or anything like that, like where I can, do repetitive work. But so everything you see here is just from my mind. And I have, I was into making seam rippers and purse hangers, and I don't require that much wood as far as that goes. We can make purse hangers and stuff, and out of like probably 2-inch by 2-inch piece of wood, maybe inch thick. I mean, it don't require much. I'd be honored if maybe if I had a couple boards or two out of this, I could make up stuff for you and tell me what you want made, and I'll do it. Memorialized stuff or.
Wally, give us an idea on the cost of how many pins you could make for what kind of a cost or thereabouts. Just some general ideas.
Boy. Well, most of the pin kits. I mean, like the pin kit, the picture of the pin kits you got right here on this page right here. are a little bit more expensive than what I'm using. Right now, I'm just starting out, say, this is more like a $2 or $3 pin kit, I think it is. My wife's got some books there on where we get our supplies from. I've been selling these here for like $25, you know. And I got $5 just in the acrylic blank itself, you know. So with the wood being furnished, that takes down some of the cost, you know, as far as that goes. So basically all we'd have to have is a pin kit and my time. I'm looking at, I don't know, $20 to $25 a pin, you know. Now, I make a stick pin that's like this right here. This is kind of unique in its own way. I take a piece of 8-inch wood, 1 inch by 1 inch, and put it in a lathe and sculpt it. But before I do this, I drill out the end of this right here with an 1/8 inch drill bit and then a 5/32, and then I take a Bic crystal pin like we used to use, you know, these kids in school used to take the darn thing out of the plastic, and you know, well, I just take that out of the plastic and put it right there in the wood, and there it is. You know, did you get some of them out?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so any pins that look like this right here, as you see right there in the displays, that's what these are. And this don't have these right here. I can turn these for, you know, say $10 to $15 a piece, just for the sake of, you know, trying to keep the cost down, and that way if you folks want, I can do it either way you want to do it. If I can do it per piece, or if you'd like, may say so many pins, and I say charge you $10 or $15 a piece, then I could do it. And then once I get them assembled, well, I can just give them to you, and you can resell them or display them or however you like. You know.
Any questions or comments? I have one. Is there any reason why the abundant branch wood couldn't be made available without touching the stem for this project? I mean, we're talking branch wood.
Well, it depends, because
12 inches in diameter.
when I started learning about this stuff, it's best to turn it out of a board that comes out of the tree. The better, because of the grain and stuff. The inner parts of branches are too soft.
Okay.
That's what my understanding is.
Okay.
So
So
you know,
whether branch or main stem, it'd have to
If-
be
if-
milled
if the branch
milled
was
into
this
boards
big-
before you used it, right?
pardon me?
It would have to be milled into boards before
Yes,
you use it?
yes,
Okay.
yes. I don't have resources for doing that. So if you had,
Right.
if you guys would say went with some of the other proposals, like making like these tables and stuff like this, if you have just a couple spare boards here and there, and you just want to give them to me to make pens, that'd be fine.
Mike, is there a portable mill that could be used with branch wood on site?
There's some local sawyers that, there's one in particular I know of that can do smaller wood under, I think it was 20 some odd inches.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be nice.
You know, if branch wood could be used, because you know, there's some question on branch wood with how it grows differently than trunk wood and how stable it is.
Right. And we're talking about 14, 15-inch and larger branches that are ancient.
And it's probably relatively hard.
Okay. Any
So-
other questions or comments?
If there was a local sawyer willing, we'd have to find out if the local
Right.
sawyer was willing to, you know, mill the wood and in return for some of the wood. It's
Right.
possible that we could find that.
Okay. All right, I think that's something to explore, because a lot of these projects aren't, like I said, they're not mutually exclusive. There's no reason why several can't be done. Mike, did you have something to say? Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, let's pursue this further, and again, it doesn't necessarily entail the main issue of memorialization, which is the big stump on the site, and it sounds like it might be something the city could do and purchase pens and resell them as a memorial item. Anyway, well, thank you very much.
Oh, no problem.
And
Thanks.
make note that Mike is, has a portable mill available. Okay, next item, reproducible paintings. This is actually, at least proposals I've seen, images of paintings already. I don't know if those are like, yeah. Okay.
Actually, I have included two sample sketches of what I propose. In particular, the first one I proposed where I'm showing the cardinal eating, on the branch eating the hackberry blossoms. It's a sketch, and I emphasize that this is a sketch. I will show you some full paintings after. But this is on the theme of the various nature life that hackberry trees support. The berries support many birds, and I used a cardinal because I like cardinals, but they also support robins and a host of other birds. Also, there's 4 or possibly 5 native butterflies that are very closely tied to the hackberry tree as well. So this proposal could include basically any of the birds or some of the butterflies instead. And the idea being that maybe they could be reproduced either as a painting, as a fundraiser, or reproduce them on some kind of certificate for donors, maybe a certificate, particularly with the one with the birds or the butterflies, emphasizing that what the hackberries support and some information about the tree itself that could be set up. The second example is of the, again, it's a sketch of a proposal for a painting of the hackberry tree itself in leaf. I'm thinking very sun-dappled, and I would emphasize that lovely root crown structure a bit more than I did here, but it was under snow, so it was a little hard to get at. So I just, okay. Oh, okay. 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 That was the 2 I forgot to send. There's no email. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. That's one. Okay, thank you. The previous one I was talking about was the example of the cardinal with the hackberry berries and showing some of the branch. And as I said, it could be just as easily another bird or butterflies, depending on the preference, because there's a great deal of insect life that's a hackberry support. This is my sketch of a proposal for a painting of the tree that could be either, again, used as a display or blown up to a full painting with background. And I emphasize it would not be oil, it would be mixture of watercolor and acrylic because that's the medium I'm best in. And I would do it, I think, if I did it as a full painting, I would do it as a tree in full leaf with a great emphasis on the lovely root structure it has, which unfortunately was buried under the snow when I was trying to get a photograph of it. So this is just my best guess at it. And as an added bonus, if there's high contrast in the image, you can get a very good black and white picture out of the same image via the magic of Photoshop. That's just simply the same picture with the color taken out. So it could be done that way to reproduce. Now, how do I get back to the other page? Okay. Here I'm just showing some examples of completed paintings because I emphasized the other two were sketch proposals. This is pretty watercolor with some acrylic here. One of my paintings. This one is more heavily watercolor, which you can see by the transparency. Again, one of my paintings. And this is a painting emphasizing a lot of bird life. And if there was a strong preference, the tree could be a night scene, but I think it would work better as a day scene. So this is just more of an example of my work as a full completed painting as opposed to a sketch. Now, in terms of costs for full-size painting, and I'm talking watercolor, standard watercolor paper, probably 30 by 40, possibly a little larger depending on what I used. Full-size painting would be about in the range of 500. Smaller painting, 8.5 by 11 up to maybe, I don't know, 15 by 20. 200 to 250. Repro cost, we'd have, frankly, repro rights. Depends on what, what rights, if you wanted full rights or just first rights, which is what I would suggest. I'm not including the cost of the scan in there if it's coming from full painting. I don't have the capability of doing a printer size scan like from a full painting, a commercial scan from a full painting like 30 by 40 runs about $50 from someplace like Scanix, and you get a 600 DPI resolution. Now, something smaller I can provide at no additional cost. I can provide scan at 300 DPI for something small enough to put on a small flatbed, like if I was going from 8.5 by 11, possibly a little larger, but it would be the maximum resolution I can provide is 300, and your printer might want 600, and I can only provide an RGB as opposed to a CMYK scan, although the printer could do the conversion. And I would, of course, be willing, I'm local, I'm in Champaign, I would be willing to, if you were printing, I would be willing to look at the proofs, which the printer would provide, and be sure the proofs were okay, and that would not be an additional charge. But I do want to emphasize that I can only provide a scan for smaller stuff and only to 300 But some printers, like I have done prints like of greeting cards just as an RGB at a printer that from just RGB files, but they were using a high-end color Xerox, not some of the more different presses. So, it just depends on what printer you use, what the printer requires, and so on. Any questions?
Questions for Mary? I had some.
Okay.
I guess if the commission if you're commissioned to provide a painting for the prices indicated, I'm guessing the uses might be, first of all, in the publication of the Legacy Tree pamphlet, which will contain probably already the botanical drawing. But then talking about prints, would the arrangement be that they be sold and you receive royalties on prints if they're used for a fundraiser?
I was thinking with a fundraiser, we could go that way, or we could just say, X amount, you pay me X amount for the right to print however many you want to print.
I see. Okay.
And I would think that would probably be just like giving you, I'm not a lawyer, but I think it would be just like giving you first publication rights or something like that,
Yeah.
as opposed to the, the full copyright.
All right. Okay.
And,
Thank
certainly the putting it in the Legacy Tree program could be fairly minimal cost, like in the pamphlet.
All right. Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Okay. Oh, I did want to
Oh,
show
go ahead.
one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One sample that might be useful.
You had it there. It's under the Internet Explorer, the blue E, right there.
Yeah.
Your website.
I wanted to show one example that had a, oh, it's not working. Or it's very slow. Well, I was going to show an example that had a full painting of a tree in it, but it's not. Oh, wait a minute, there it is. Where's the right page? Here we are. I just was. This one is an example, a little better example of the color I get when it's a full painting as opposed to a sketch of the foliage. Although I was using the foliage as a background here. I don't know if that's useful or not, but anyway, I just want to show an example of that. Any more questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary. I see we're tapping a small part of the vein of talent we have in Urbana, and grateful for people coming forward and volunteering ideas and that. And of course, this one doesn't depend on doing anything at all with the physical presence of the wood, of the stump and the remaining wood. Again, thank you. Replicate tree trunk.
Since I downloaded the document, and I can show some shots, I'll finish up the remainder of the proposals by utilizing the laptop here. This was an idea, actually not a bad idea, of that came from wanting to replicate the trunk in some permanent fashion. And in fact, we have a company nearby that can do just that and does that, and replicates various trees and trunks that are brought into buildings, museums. ID&R has used them, and that's Taylor Studios out of Rantoul. So I followed through with the idea to see what that kind of cost would be. I thought it might be out of our range. and it is a significant cost, but it's more of a commercial kind of museum piece. So to satisfy those that were interested in doing something like this, I went ahead and followed through with finding out what the costs were. So I show two samples here of their work that are, one's a museum piece that is provided for some, I believe it's a children's museum, some educational piece, and then the one on the right is actually a play log that they designed that kids can climb through and over and through. And the price of these projects are anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000. And what they do is they have a process that they will come out, and I believe it's pliable material that they paint onto the tree trunk that they can carefully peel off and replicate somehow the exact nature of the tree trunk, and then replicate it in fiberglass. So that was the idea with Proposal 12.
Okay. Questions? Yeah, when I read that one, I was thinking of the dioramas at the Field Museum of Natural History, which are, 20, 30 feet tall. But you're saying that maybe even like a little 3-foot display like that might cost $20,000?
Yeah, well, I think there was the one price I looked at was no more than an 8 or 10-foot log was $20-ish, $25,000. There was one as low as 15, but it wasn't. It was probably right around 8 feet, not any less.
And what would it be, fiberglass or resin?
Yeah, it's kind of a fiberglass resin. I don't know their full process, but it was something along the lines that they start the process with painting this flexible material that's on the outside of the tree trunk, and then they take that back to the shop, and they're able to replicate the shape and all the detail in the trunk and the bark with that material, and they make a cast, and then create the thing in a fiberglass-like material. I think it's fiberglass.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike. Any questions? All right. What's the next one? Number 13, I already mentioned to you that that's in progress. We'll see if we get any of the winter hardwood tip cuttings to root. We also have some parts of the branches in cool storage to see if we can do some bud grafting on hackberry rootstock from a nursery. And apparently the hackberry in the yard adjacent to that Sim hackberry comes from the root system of that hackberry, and so another attempt will be made this spring to get softwood cuttings and try and propagate those from that sprout. It's about a 7-8 inch diameter small tree. So again, we may have clonal material from memorials, and the cost is it's volunteer, so it's nothing. All right, 14, we already have a completed one, the group photo with the Sim hackberry. I don't know if we need any more comment on that. Dennis? Sure.
Yeah, this was a great idea. It didn't really come out quite how we imagined it, however. I think my intent when we were talking about it was that we would like to have, of course, a picture of the tree, but we were also interested historically in the fact that the neighborhood's individuals came out to celebrate the tree. And unfortunately, because only the fisheye lens was used, the faces of all the people who came out for that photograph are pretty much undistinguishable, and nobody took a picture, to my knowledge, of the group of people alone, just the people. So we didn't really memorialize what we thought we were memorializing. So if anybody in the listening audience happened to take a photograph using their smartphone or camera while the group was standing below the tree, that would be the only record of the people who came out in support of this tree that I'm aware of. And I brought my camera, and I didn't bother to do it because I thought we had something very organized and professional happening. And in retrospect, we realized that we didn't capture the moment but we do have a really long, skinny, and kind of distorted picture of the full length of the hackberry tree. So if anybody's listening who happened to be there with a camera and took photographs, please contact us. Thank you.
And just a comment, Dennis, there's still a 40-foot stump there. If somebody would like to take a photograph again, you wouldn't necessarily include anything above that 40-foot limit. Okay, another completed one, free of cost, the LiDAR scan of tree.
Jeff, real quick on the photo.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
That was donated by Daryl Holman.
Okay.
So that was no cost to
No
that
cost.
photo, and they are for sale, and he sold several of those at
good.
cost of only the printing, and proceeds for some of those sales are being sent back to the Legacy Tree Program.
Great.
So his interpretation of how to handle that, and I thought it was a good idea, was he wanted to capture the group that was in front of the tree and the entire tree. So he had a lens that was on his camera that was able to encompass the entire tree, which was a pretty rare ability, and the group by the tree. And then we took the names of everybody that was there for that picture in case we wanted to utilize it for an historic record. We have everybody's name that was in that, including the dog. So I'll email you a link. It's Daryl Holman's website, and I can email you the link. So he has various sizes available for purchase. Bill Gray's looked into one of those. I've purchased one.
So can you can't distinguish the faces, or you can, or is it?
Well, I mean, I think you can.
Okay.
It's not, it's not a photo that you would typically see of a group of people. We're a little further away than that in order to capture the entire tree, but everybody's distinguishable.
Okay. Okay. Again, no cost. It's already in process. This tree is more memorialized than any tree already I've heard of in Champaign. There's a lot of interest in it. That's good. LiDAR scan of tree, I know that's completed. It's no cost. It's pretty neat. It's reproducible. You get three-dimensional images and reconstructions. From there, I don't know where you go. If you holographically project a tree and tear down the neon sculpture over by the city building and replace it with this, or what? I'm sorry, I'm making a personal commentary.
I thought it was a pretty neat idea, and I don't know what they can do with LiDAR scans or 3D images, but it will be the first 3D image we have of any Urbana city tree that I'm aware of. And certainly it would make a neat record, I think.
I think it ought to be archived and its ability mentioned in the Legacy Tree initial pamphlet of the Legacy Tree program.
And I would like to thank Steve for being and Chris with the Illinois Geological Survey for getting that together. It was staged as a demonstration, so there was no cost to that, and that's a substantial savings because they're a fairly expensive ordeal to go through. That company came from St. Louis, wasn't it?
Will that be available on like the Urbana Arbor Division webpage so people can bring up three-dimensional images or LiDAR scan material? Or is it too complex to?
Well, as Mike just said, it was the scan was done for free. The
Right.
scanning equipment is something like a $40,000 or $50,000 device.
Right.
The data has been from that scan is transferred to the State Geological Survey,
Okay.
and that data the survey considers in the public domain. There are that said, it's right now that you can interact with it with proprietary software, but I think there exists software that can sort of serve that three-dimensional model over the web in a way that the public could interact
Sort
with
of,
it.
yeah, a
Similar
graphical
to like,
representation.
Google Street View or something where you
Okay.
can kind of pan and zoom and rotate the
Oh,
image.
cool.
But this is, right now that image processing is being handled on volunteer time, and so it's on a slower timetable than it otherwise might be.
Okay, great. Well, that's done, and again, no cost, and thank you, Steve, and thank you indeed for being involved in this whole process from the beginning. The last is the botanical ink drawing of the tree, and Mike, go ahead. I guess that's already been
Yes.
commissioned as part of the pamphlet
Right.
initial
Our
plan?
idea, Gene and I had talked a number of months ago before this hackberry tree ever came into the idea of memorializing it. And we were looking to utilize Gene and possibly the Legacy Tree Program to reproduce, to make some publications and reproduce some of the trees that may become legacy trees. So I had her information, and I contacted her with the thought that we would do our first tree botanical drawing of a tree and have it available for our legacy literature. So this is a smaller image of it, but this is it. And that would be the last of the ideas that came in. What you'll also see, and I wanted to thank Jean Burridge is here that did the drawing.
Thank you, Gene.
So she's available if we so decide for that kind of work on other trees.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming Mary Margrave is too. Okay.
Okay.
The last thing on that proposal was a matrix.
Before we get to that, again, with Gene's sketch, that might be available in poster form for people to purchase with...
I think those opportunities are there, yes,
Okay.
and that would be okay with Gene. Yeah.
Sure, I think...
So this piece is ours to utilize how we'd like.
Yeah, so we already have quite a few pieces of memorialization to work with, and again, go ahead with the mosaic,
The matrix.
the matrix.
Yeah, the idea that I wanted to create here was just to show what proposals could be done together, because there's an opportunity to do a number of these. So that's simply what this is. The green areas are the proposals that are compatible with each other, and then some of them would omit the ability to do others, and those are the blacked out areas. So that's the proposals.
So you're saying, according to the amount of green there, most of these are compatible with at least one other.
Yes.
Okay. All right, this makes it a very complex and interesting prioritization process. And again, like I said, I think some of these that can be done with branchwood may fall outside of the prioritization as an additional topic. Okay, well, thanks for being patient and listening to all the presentations. Are there any new ideas that that are coming forth? I think I understand. Yes, Dennis.
But it's not to memorialize, it's not an art project, so if you want to have them talk about it later.
Right, it's to memorialize the tree, and part of memorialization is an aesthetic component. So this is not a pure art competition or anything like that. Yes, and again, Lisa, in the way she, in her proposal to help us, has included other than just artists in the group that would make judgments and prioritize the trees, like citizens, members of the tree commission, and some local artists. Now, one thing that, again, we've had this list of proposals. Lisa mentioned maybe putting out a very brief solicitation of more. Is that to the art community? Or the general public? So this may not be the end of it. And again, any solicitations that come in, I hope will be detailed enough that we won't meet about it. It'll just become part of the grist for the process. So Dennis, if you'd like to comment now.
Really is about the Legacy Tree Program as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
not this tree. So
Mhm.
I don't know if you'd like to do it.
With the green notices that you got for people that wanted to speak, is there anything remaining on the? Most of those might have been.
We've kind of had questions and comments along the way.
Most of those might have been from the artisans.
Steve, I'll just go through these, and you can have a chance to talk, Dennis. Steve, do you have anything else you'd like to comment on? Sure. We're now in the discussion part, the last part of the agenda.
Sure.
And anything that's germane to the memorialization is germane to this discussion, especially the ones we went over in detail, so everybody could have a feeling for what's in the pot, including the tree commission. And I think hearing the presentations from the authors greatly enhanced the outline information that we had from last meeting and people have brought in. So go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Thanks very much. My name is Steve Wald. I live at 611 West Illinois Street. And I want to start by actually echoing Dennis's comments, his prior comments when he wanted to thank the Tree Commission. I'd like to thank you very much for this public meeting and particularly the special meeting over the tree. It was, I think, an exemplary demonstration of a willingness to provide additional public procedure and transparency around a difficult decision. I think the way the commission and the staff proceeded has really managed to take a difficult situation and increase public trust in the process and increase public involvement in Urbana's trees in a way that's been very positive. So I'm really impressed with the way the Tree Commission is proceeding on this, with this removal and with its memorialization. And I also want to just say the presentations tonight for proposals to memorialize this tree, I feel incredible gratification for the artists so far who've come forward with ideas and generous dedication of their time and interest. I just really appreciate it as someone who cared a lot about this tree. It does me a lot of good to know that the community cares about it too, and I just want to thank them. So really quick, you didn't ask this, but I just want to offer or volunteer some principles for thinking about the memorial. These are pretty obvious, but I'm going to just state them anyway as you consider proposals. So first of all, remembering the tree itself, as it stood, where it stood, its shape, its form, is an obvious first principle. Celebrating its legacy, and I would say this would extend to the tree's natural history and interpreting its natural history in some way, and I'm going to comment on that in a minute. Secondly, its history of preservation by the Arbor Division and by Urbana. This tree, although it obviously reached the end of its life, it's also a story of successful stewardship story, in that it was preserved, it was not removed after a storm event 25 years ago, and I think that aspect of the tree ought to be celebrated going forward. The third is its role as possibly the inaugural or the first legacy tree under the Legacy Tree Program. This reminds me, I was going to pose this question: what is the status of this tree as the Urbana's first legacy tree? It came up at the special meeting. I kind of expected to see it on the agenda tonight. Just an update on that would be a matter of inquiry for me. I'd like to pose that question. And then the final principle of its memorial, to recognize the civic engagement, the transparency, the public involvement that happened around the tree's removal decision. So if whatever proposals go forward, if we can try to cover those bases in some way, I think that would be good. With the overall purpose, of course, of hopefully promoting additional recognition and care and stewardship and retention of our remaining trees in Urbana, which we have many that need care and are worth publicizing. I guess one other comment I would make on the proposals themselves, I think they're all great. I think the proposal for a table that could possibly be used by the city in a public setting, I'm looking at the table I'm sitting at now. I think it'd be amazing if this table was replaced by the hackberry, and I think that would certainly be a way of taking forward its message of both remembering the tree and marking its role, the civic engagement that occurred through this commission with the tree. As for the retention of the trunk or not, as a standing memorial or not, I don't have a hard and fast preference for that, but I would be concerned. I don't offer any expertise about whether or how quickly that tree will rot if it's retained in place. But if it did rot quickly and was ephemeral, at least in terms of long time scales, if it was gone in 5 or 10 or 15 years, that might represent a loss in that if the bulk of the wood, if we kind of burned through it quickly that way, that would be a consideration, as opposed to utilizing that wood in memorials that would be more enduring. And then the final thing that I think is additive, two other things, sorry, here, real quick. The LiDAR scan that we just talked about, I'd like to expedite it, at least for this purpose. I think it could be useful to artists in future proposals to memorialize the tree, because this would be a model of the tree, a relatively detailed one that you could, the tree's not there to look at anymore, to take sketches from, but this 3D model would be one that you could rotate and look at angles and use to guide sketches or paintings or other things like that. So I think that it's also possible that point cloud, that scan of the tree, could be used for, I don't know, 3D printing part of the tree in some way. So it may be useful raw material to provide in any kind of RFP for artistic proposals related to the tree. In that regard, another question or a specific request would be, could part of the city's website, the Tree Commission's website, or the Arbor Division, or the Legacy Tree page, could we establish a presence on the web related to this tree for the public to, for example, link to Daryl Homan's photograph of the tree, upload stories about the tree, their stories of the tree, or photos of the tree, and of course to link to the ongoing solicitation for artistic proposals, something like that. I think that would be helpful. Informally, I've attempted to maintain this sort of presence on Facebook for the tree. That's a little difficult. It's a little unofficial. It'd be nice if the city could do something to help be a central node for information sharing on this going forward. And lastly, in terms of interpreting the tree's history and natural history, I mean, part of that, there could be stories and photographs of this tree that are still untapped in the community, and it would be useful to collect those in some way. I know we're assembling quite a probably scrapbook of things about the tree to date. There's been news stories, etc. But for the chance for longtime residents on that street or former students who lived in that house and things like that to who may have a photo or a story of the tree to provide that. So those are all suggestions, and thank you all for your time.
A good suggestion, Stephen. Of all the old maps and historical information I've seen, it would be nice to preserve them at least linked to the Urbana Arbor Division homepage. And this process has brought together a lot of information and passion and on the tree, and I'd hate to see it go to waste. I think Dennis had some maps and things that he might make available for that. And again, if somebody would like to take leadership on that, that would be great. I think we're open to it. Second comment, the trees on Urbana's Parkway belong to you, not to the Tree Commission. We're supposed to represent you, not to the Arbor Division, not even just to the City Council, except as elected representatives of the citizens. So it's good to see Urbana citizens taking ownership of what they do own, in fact, as public trees. So I'd like to compliment citizens for stepping forward and being involved in the process of managing and looking after, stewarding our tree natural heritage. All right. Wallace Owen from Neoga. You've had your say, okay. Daniel Schneider. Okay, yeah, that's right. Mary Margrave, I take it you've had your say. Johnny Marlin, John. Yeah, I said Johnny.
Actually, it's John C.
I know, I'm sorry, I don't know where Johnny came from.
I do.
I think one of my kids, maybe.
I'm John Marlin. I've lived in Urbana for a long time, and I live at 2203 Boudreaux Circle now. Used to be on Nevada Street. This tree situation's been kind of fascinating to me. I've been an advocate of native species for many, many years, mainly growing the woodland wildflowers. But I think an important way to try and further the legacy of this tree is to think about what it means. And part of what it means to me is that maybe 150 or 200 years from now, there'll be a meeting like this to discuss one of the trees that gets planted to help memorialize what this tree stands for, which is an important part of the history of Illinois and the legacy of this area. I mean, people may not realize it, but our native trees and shrubs and flowers are in great danger right now because of the influx of non-native species which are taking over our woods and our wetlands and our prairie areas, along with the cultural practices we're doing as urban and rural people. For example, the very common thing that happens in a new subdivision is all the topsoil is scraped away and the developer plants the cheapest trees that can be found and the cheapest bushes, which are frequently invasive plants from other continents, which have leaves that our native butterflies, moths, and other insects cannot eat because they did not co-evolve with them. And without beating the point to death, I'd bring your attention to a book called Bringing Nature Home by an entomologist named Douglas Tallamy, which goes into great detail in a way that's understandable about how this is happening and what's happening. And one thing he points out is that oak trees in the United States support over 500 native butterflies and moths, whereas many of the foreign trees from Europe and Asia support 1 or 2 species at most. So it's an important issue. And I would think that we might want to redouble our efforts at encouraging our park districts and our individuals and the university above all to begin planting a variety of native trees and shrubs and other plants that our native fauna can use. And if you don't care about butterflies and moths, Dr. Tallamy points out that 96% of the terrestrial bird species in North America feed their young insects. Even if the birds as adults eat nuts and berries, the baby birds and chicks, they're fed insects. And as we lose our native trees, so goes the birds long term. But anyway, that's a whole story that we won't spend a lot of time on. I just wanted to make that point. And in terms of this particular tree and some of the other major trees that are going to come down in the not too distant future, I think a wonderful thing to do with a chunk of the trunk is put it in a park or at a school and let it spend the next 20 to 50 years slowly decomposing, where it would be a home for many wood-boring beetles and other critters that live in decaying trees. And the park districts in particular could put them strategically where a log could be watched along a trail side or something. I know at Leo School when my kids were growing up, one of the favorite things a kid had was a very large piece of a tree trunk sitting in the schoolyard that kids climbed all over. And that would be a very simple, inexpensive thing to do with a big piece of tree. Maybe not this tree, maybe only 10 or 15 feet of this tree, but it's something to think about for the future. So anyway, as part of the Legacy Tree Program, I think we should be helping educate the public as to the importance of having our native species come back because they're going fast. So that's about all I had to say.
I'm sorry. Thank you, John. Any other comments or? Yeah, you make a good point, and coincidentally enough, at the last small meeting of the Tree Commission, we made just that point and recommended a policy go forth that we emphasize planting native species in the future. If you look at the number of old trees that are going and the number of new trees that are being planted, the majority of the older trees that survived a long time in Urbana are native species. There's been a trend to replace them with non-native trees. And again, we've discussed and actually officially recommended and re-emphasis on putting in native trees in our plantings to replace these other legacy trees. Another thing, I don't recall where I read it. Maybe it's in Bringing Nature Home or an excerpt from that. But you talk about insects and their importance to birds. People have noted along the East Coast in particular, which is more heavily urbanized than we are, that the replacement of native species with ornamental plantings in urban areas has basically made it hard for migrating birds to get the food, insect, and fruit and nut food that they evolved with over thousands and thousands of years. And this, along with the destruction of habitat in their nesting areas, and their wintering areas seems to be a factor in reducing the number of certain bird species. So again, we're sensitive to the idea of using the city not only as a display of vanishing natural heritage, but also as a general refugium for migrating birds through the better incorporation of native species. So we talked to this, actually we were on the same same branch, so to speak, with you, and we've already discussed that in our tree commission meetings before we even started considering the hackberry issue. So thanks for your comments, John. Michael E. Pittman. Mike. Is Mike here? Spoke. Dennis spoke. I've got two Dennises. Okay, I believe we're done with the legacy tree discussion. No? Okay. Dennis, you're the last one here. You had two green notes. And I've seen a picture of a legacy tree plaque that you
Great.
provided.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Not this particular tree, but the program itself. We've talked about how to memorialize the tree, and we're talking, tonight the discussion was about a particular tree, but the Legacy Tree Program is a larger and more encompassing experience for the city, and we're going to be eventually having nominations for many different kinds of trees. And so thinking about that and how to educate and bring information about the uniqueness of each individual tree that's successfully nominated, how to market in the location where people can recognize that they're next to it when they're walking or coming up, or if they're looking for it. If we have a legacy tree guide or a walking path, brochure, when they're on the street, how they know where they get to the right tree, because, unless the tree is marked in some way. So I did a little bit of thinking about it. I've done for the other parts of memorial plaquing in the city, different projects. I've worked on the Royer District and how to design plaques for that. So I've come up with a suggestion. And it doesn't mean you have to adopt it, but it's just a suggestion. So this is a little an example at full size of what a plastic 1/2 inch laminated plaque for the Legacy Tree Program as a whole might look like. And I designed it so that it would be small, informative, provide a photograph of the tree, because I think it's real important to have visual identification. It would allow text, which would include information about the girth, the height, the weight, the flowers, the pollination, whatever is applicable to that species. It would include the Latin name for the tree. It would have also any information about the history of the tree, which might be pertinent. And I'm just going to turn this around so people here in the audience can see. And so what I'm suggesting is that that the program of Legacy Tree, once we get going on it, this might be a nice way to. This is an option as opposed to a bronze plaque, and the price is actually the same, or maybe it'll be a little cheaper. I did work with the laminating company in St. Louis to get a preliminary quote, and I found that after I got the quote, I actually decided to make the plaque smaller, not only because it wasn't necessary to be any larger, but that it would be a little bit cheaper to reproduce. And this is intended to be placed on the same kind of post that you would use in the parkway to indicate no parking. It would just be one of these preformed metal posts with millions of perforations up and down for affixing any kind of sign with two bolts. So Ethnographics in St. Louis manufactures these in conjunction with a company of laminating company in Texas. And if 5 were made at the same time, if you had chosen 5 legacy trees, they estimated a cost for a size that was actually larger than this, which I originally sent to them about a month ago, to be about $430 to make a sign. So I think that I'm going to pass this around, and you can keep this if you'd like. And I did send you a JPEG via email this afternoon, kind of explaining what I would suggest would be a thoughtful way for doing a more professional, informative, educational marking plaque system. And so I'm just offering that at no cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, I personally like the idea of putting more than just a sort of a gravestone epitaph in a bronze plaque. And the photograph and the educational material have value, and I think it's a great idea. I think there may be some details to work out. One of my concerns would be vandalism, and coming up with a really durable display method would be important. A post, some kind of post that's hard to destroy, and an attachment that makes it difficult to easily vandalize. I remember we had a tree trail once many years ago. The effort was led by a citizen named Charlie Walters, who was a member of the Tree Commission in Carl Park. And they had a tree trail on a pamphlet, and in order to avoid vandalism, they put these little metal tags way up, you could read the number that they were 10, 15 feet up, so it was impossible to rip them out or vandalize them. But that won't work with this. Certainly have to be able to read it, and I thank you for your suggestion. Excuse me. Any more discussion on memorialization? We do have some new business. We don't have a lot of time for it, but it's from Dennis about the planned seating for market at the square. Did you want to discuss that tonight?
Yeah, I can be very brief.
Okay. Go ahead.
About a year ago, I never would have imagined I would have so many things to say about trees. It just is interesting. Just very recently, the Market at the Square brought to the City Council a proposal for, it's a very good idea, of an outdoor seating area that would be permanent rather than just a couple of chairs and a canopy to provide seating at the market. And why does this come for me to discuss it at the Tree Commission? The location of the outdoor seating area is proposed that it be right across the street from the front door of the city building, in the parkway. Well, it's kind of like the parkway. There's really not so much of a parkway there because the sidewalk comes right up to the street, and then immediately afterward there's a planting area that defines some of the shapes of the parking lot. And currently there's a large blue spruce and another hackberry, planted, and some low evergreen shrubs in the location. So the suggestion that's being considered is that all these things be removed, a patio space be created, and then 3 brand new trees be planted. So I guess my question to you, and maybe to the city, is you have 2 mature trees that are about, 25 years old each, or 30 years old. Maybe the hackberry is larger, which are sources of shade, and they're already at the location that the suggested patio is suggested to be. So my question is, why would it be appropriate to remove 2 healthy existing trees from a location so that you could make a cute patio, put some flowers in, and then have to plant 3 young trees to start all over again? And I wouldn't think that the shade provided for them, which is really kind of the point of putting the trees in there at the patio, so that when people are sitting there, they will have shade in the summertime. That's one of the big concerns of people who are sitting in the market. So why would you kind of retrogress and wait perhaps 20 years for those trees to become mature enough to provide the shade that you're going to be losing by removing two pretty healthy looking trees, which you can discern when you walk out the front door. So I'm just saying, it seems somehow, I really like the idea of providing this, but maybe the location needs to be reconsidered. And if the tree commission is, if one of its purposes is to protect the living trees of Urbana, can we reconsider the location or the configuration of this patio so that we're not taking two trees out needlessly? So I'm just saying, I think it's something that the tree commission might want to have a consideration on before a final plan arrives and, you know, the trees are removed forthwith. So the city council is currently looking at it. They may actually be voting to adopt this plan next week, although I think I'm going to ask that there be a, you know, maybe, I think I'm going to suggest that it maybe needs to have a little more time to consideration. So I'm just wondering if the tree commission would like to look into it for the benefit of the people, because these are the people's trees. So, and it's on city property. So thank you. That's my question to you.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. It sounds like it's on a short track for the city council. Mike, would you like to comment? You probably know more about this than anybody at this.
Bruce is here. He's overseeing the project, but I understand it. It's gone through committee, and it's heading to council for final approval. It's been approved. Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought the project had already been approved.
So it didn't even go to council for. That's the interesting part about this. There was not any public input. There was no way for the city council to even discuss it more than just the 5 minutes that they were presented to it, and suddenly now it's.
Okay. Yeah, the tree commission hasn't been consulted, and I hadn't heard about it until today. I guess it would be germane to, it'd be nice if we could see the plans, maybe. We're not having a meeting anytime soon, but if they could be distributed to the individual committee members for input, and if I could direct Mike to find out if there are alternatives of placement, or if that's the only place that it can go. In terms of our handling tree appeals, usually we have citizens that want to cut down trees because they're nuisances. And the precedence for that is if it's merely a nuisance and it's not a high priority on the hazard list, we don't support its being taken out. On the other hand, there's also a precedence where trees that are appealed to us that are inconvenient and maybe in poor shape, but they don't rate high on the hazard list, we have made stipulations that it can be removed at the behest, at the cost of the landowner, and the city will replace it with another tree. So in terms of overall policy, you know, nobody's brought it before us, but I think we can look into the idea of alternate placement if that's feasible or not, and the condition of the trees and any trade-offs inherent in that fast-track park or bench area.
I'll let Bruce speak to the project, but what I'm aware of it, we did look at the trees prior to them selecting this final spot, and the situation was the trees are in decline. So when we get into certain situations where trees are in decline, the question becomes, do we spend money on retaining that tree, or pruning the dead wood out or what have you, as opposed to removing it and replacing it? Go ahead, Bruce. I'll let you speak to this project.
Again, October, the community development approached us
to meet them over at the site for the market at the square. We looked at the two locations. I mean, if you're looking at just the square, there's really only two locations that were large enough. This one and then the corner of Illinois with Vine. We drew up designs for both of them, went through our streetscape committee, back and forth estimates, looking at it. This one was the best location for the amount of money that was available. And we looked at the trees there, like Mike said, the hackberry. My guess is that it's used all the root space that's available to it a number of years ago and has since gone into a state of decline, spiraling. About a third of the crown has been removed already. There are seams that are visible. Even some of the exposed wood is becoming punky. So I'm not sure. You know, I mean, I'm sure it would stay there for a number of years, but I'm not sure in what condition it would remain. And we're now creating a new target with a number of more people at it. So I'm not sure it's wise to leave the tree. The blue spruce is in the middle of what's going to be the hardscape. So I mean, it's not possible to maintain the blue spruce and put the seating area in at the same time.
Well, that has cytosporus as well.
Yeah, and that has cytospora at the base, so some of the lower limbs have already died. The large yew that's there is possible to design around. The hardscape itself, you know, the hackberry is not imposing on that. I mean, that part of it could go on if you want to shelve this thing until it goes through discussion. We can postpone the planting. I mean, I'm not going to say that it has to go in, but the hardscape's got to be done by May 1st if it's going to meet the deadline that was set for me. Well, I guess on the Saturdays when they have the market, there's a number of vendors now that are selling items that people buy to eat, and people want a place to sit down. They've been sitting on the curb. There's no place to go, so we have this now. It'll accommodate about 20 people.
Right. So, I mean, I support the seating idea. What occurred, however, is total lack of public information. Even the city council members didn't really have like more than a day to, you know, evaluate or look at this. And you don't think about the things that you see a picture of and you don't realize that they're going to remove the trees. You see trees planted, you think, oh, they've included the trees. It comes to a meeting where we're making the decision that very same day, that very same hour. There's not a chance for the public to weigh in on any kind of a situation about tree removal. And this is pretty typical, really, about tree removal in general in the city. That's why we're having a legacy tree program. So I'm sensitive about it, and I think this committee should be too. And I think that, yes, there's not a rush to put a plaza in, I don't think. This plaza can go in, you know, next year, I suppose, really. It's a convenience, yes, and it's an amenity. But without any kind of public input or discussion about it, there might have been some discussion at the Market of the Square committee, but we're not aware of that. I don't attend those meetings. The public is not aware of those meetings or what goes on in it. Just like really for many people, the public wasn't aware of the tree commissioners' discussions because they weren't available. Now they're being televised. So I have a problem with the process. I just want to say I think it undermines the public's honor in as far as like just tree removal to make way for a patio. I mean, I don't know. Let's work around what we have. We're trying to preserve the urban forest. So let's not be freewheeling with them. Let's consider them and try to like work with them. And I would like to say that every time a tree is removed, it's got this disease or that disease, or it's got a weak something, or some of the crown is gone or something. Every single tree in the city is weathering, aging, dropping some branches here and there, but we're not universally removing them. I think it's not a good excuse to say that, well, it's dropped a branch, or there might be some mold on one side of this tree. If you go outside the door and look at the trees across the street, I think that there needs to be, maybe there needs to be a paper on it and say to what degree do we know that this information is absolutely accurate. I think that we're being hasty and we're using excuses to remove what look to be trees that anybody would be proud to have in their yard. That's all.
One question for you, Dennis, before you leave. Did you have this discussion prior with the city council prior to their vote?
We had a discussion about, the materials of the patio.
Your concerns.
No.
You didn't discuss that with the council?
Well, I brought it up that I thought that maybe it was going to be something that the tree commission should review. And I forgot that that this was a council vote, not a committee vote. In a committee, the appropriate place for these things to come up is in a committee, because then there's a discussion and then it's moved forward to the next week for final approval. And that allows anybody to bring their thoughts to the process during that week. But when it's put on our agenda and we're making the decision that night, and people have only had the packet for 2 days and it's over a weekend, who is watching in the community to have an opportunity to say anything about anything? I think it's just a really bad situation.
One last question. How did you vote on that?
I agreed with it because I didn't think about it until after I walked out of the building. I said, what just happened? When I got home, I thought, you know what? I really made a big mistake. What I was supporting was the concept of seating for the community. I thought that was a great idea. But when I realized that the seating really could be almost anywhere. It seems like the seating could be, it's very arbitrary about, I think, where the seating is placed. And if it's not, I just don't know. It's just very interesting. Yes, the vote was 6-1 or 5-1 or whatever it was. So yeah, it's going to happen. I'm just saying that this is not a good process, and I think there's a breakdown.
Okay. Looks like, in some ways, since the city council passed it, kind of the horse is out of the barn. But I think we might have some fruitful discussion on policies for these developments in the past. I know this one may have popped up, and Development Commission may have had some funds and wanted to get the seating in before the next market in the square outside starts. But I know in the past we've had discussions about Development Commission funding of streetscape planning in downtown Urbana, for example, and for whatever reason it didn't happen. And the input on this one came from other groups, I suppose, zoning and planning. Was there a public input process for this? No. Okay. Because, there's so much construction and that sort of activity going on that not every tree removal is reviewed by us or perhaps any other group. But we'll look into the general policies for that, and we don't have authority, we advise the city council, and I'm not quite sure how we approach past legislation, but I think we'll look into it. I'll ask the tree commission members to have a look at the trees. Some of us have expertise in insect and disease issues, and get back to Mike. And generally, we support the professional recommendations of Mike. I mean, there's never been, a lot of things like the actual status of that tree weren't apparent to me or the public just looking at it from the bottom, but there were some real issues there. But we'll take it into consideration and see if we can't come up with ways to do better as a general policy into the future. All right, thank you, Dennis.
I think that would be a good discussion for a future meeting, and well worth the while of talking about why we remove trees in certain circumstances.
Yeah,
so,
economics, trade-offs.
Sure, there's a number of reasons other than just hazards.
Physical constraints. A lot of trees get planted where they shouldn't be for whatever reason. Sometimes I think it's because the various commissions and special projects don't always go before commissions and park commissions and that. They just happen because money becomes available. Or I suspect this one is considered a real asset for community development and commerce and that. So anyway, we'll see if we can do better in representing tree interests and have a thorough discussion on it, which will be open to the public as well. All our meetings are open to the public. Okay, are there any more comments or concerns? If not, do I see a motion to adjourn?
Jeff, one last
Oh, I'm
thing
sorry,
I'd
go
like to
ahead.
mention, just for the record of this meeting, since it was mentioned about the hollows and the hackberry tree. I did measure those when they did come down as well. And the two limbs that were over the house fell within standards of removal. If you measure the sapwood versus the rot, that they were, one was right around 30%, the other was under 30%, about 26%. So those fell within the standards of being recommended for removal.
Again,
just
it
for the
wasn't,
record.
you know, the decay was right there at the branch juncture, and what was of equal concern to me was not just the decayed wood, but the cracks and fractures that had come about from physical twisting and that. And there can be a lot of wood there with cracks and checks in it in such a way that they're going to fail. They actually, as was stated, those branches, including especially one over the house, were already failing, and so that was an issue.
The hollows weren't our biggest concern. It was
Yeah,
the rot that was
exactly.
below them, but the hollows were also within standard of removal.
If they'd been hollow, there would have been less weight at the branch juncture, and it would have been actually less of a problem if they had been hollow and with healthy sapwood. Okay. All right. Well, we're open to public input all the time. We've got a lot of stuff to work on here, and Lisa's going to help us as we move forward and identify priorities and compatibilities and aesthetic as well as suitability of proposals. And chances are we'll come up with more than a few that we can push forward for prioritization and funding, which will be the next step, finding funding, either private or city or public. And we already actually got, I have to compliment the mayor. She, the extra cost of leaving the stump there for the decision-making process was $1,000, so that we would have the opportunity to have entertain the full suite of options for preserving the tree. And she came up with $1,000. It did not come out of the city budget, so there's a commitment for any extra costs of dealing with the remaining stump, pending the decision on priorities. Okay. All right. Now, do I see a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Barbara, second. All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.